I had an interesting meeting with someone I call Vinny, a person I've spoken about before in a previous video, and I'll add the link to that video down below. Vinny and I met in a quiet place, and he looked to be well and seemed to be in good spirits. Right off the bat, he made me laugh because other than an older couple, no one was in this place. Yet he still looked around before he spoke, and he started with, "Bo, I don't know how you do it, dealing with all these," and I can't use his words because the video will get demonetized, all the time talking shit. I gave Vinny my answer, and he agreed with my thought process and said, "You're right, not any one of them." I asked how he was doing and if he'd been putting my advice to any use. He showed me some properties he was looking at, and one was located somewhere that I suggested he stay away from. But that's his decision if he chooses to live in that area. He then said to me, "I gotta tell you, anyone who wants this," pinching his shirt, "has gotta have their heads examined." And he continued, I can't say the name of the family, just straightened out a guy not long ago. The guy's done well for himself. And I'm looking at him thinking, why would you do this to yourself? You need it like you need a hole in your head. You remember when we were kids, you had wise guys in the neighborhood, and every kid with a demented mind wanted to be like them. I told Vinny I was one of those kids. He laughed and said, "I know, I'm demented too," and continued, "Most of those guys were good guys. Now all you have is assholes. I don't have to tell you. My new thing is, I don't want to meet or be introduced to any of these new guys." Then he said that he was in a restaurant when someone I once knew walked in with a girl. The guy never met Vinny, and he said, "I'm watching this guy, his mannerisms, and I'm thinking about how you described him, and you on the money. I don't know him, and I want to keep it that way. You know what needs to be done? They need to shelf him and the guy that put him up." He's referring to the guy who proposed him. I then told Vinny that a viewer mentioned to me that there are people speculating who he was and assuming that he's Anthony Grado. I almost spit my food out when he answered me. Tell them I said if I was Anthony Grado, God forbid, I'd shoot myself. Anthony Grado was a Lucchese member who was put on the shelf, and also the same person who was in Dom Trusello's house the last time I was there. That day, Dom introduced him to Spanky and me and said I'm taking him off the shelf, which Dom couldn't do. Mikey DeSantis determined that Grado was never coming off the shelf. I told Vinny a story of years ago when I was in prison. Anthony Grado came to my house and told my mother that a certain person sent him there to pick up money. My mother called that person, who called him a liar, and told her to tell him to leave, which she did. Not long after, the house was robbed, and it wasn't until years later that my mother told me she believed it was Grado. I kidded with Vinny and told him that he looks a little like Grado, and he cursed me. In December 2018, Anthony Grado pled guilty and was sentenced to 12 years for conspiracy to distribute oxycodone. Grado and a friend of his threatened the Brooklyn doctor at knife point, as well as verbally threatened him to write prescriptions. His scheduled release date is December 2026. And by the way, the reason Grado was shelved was over his drug use. Vinny then brought up YouTube and says lately there's been discussions basically saying that any friend, which is an inducted member, that goes on YouTube or anywhere else is considered a dog and should be shelved on the spot. He also added, where do these assholes get the bullshit that they're saying? They should all find a new habit. He then explained something that was said regarding Mikey Knows, which he stated was absolutely untrue, and added, if these people are paying for information, they should definitely get a refund. Most of these guys on YouTube need to get potato sacked, which had me hysterical laughing. Years ago, a potato sack would be used to throw over a person's head while hitting him with weapons of choice. And I haven't heard that expression in many years. He added, then they'll look like Mr. Potato Head. Then he brought up Joe Camerano, the former Banano acting boss, and said when they shelved Joe, all the respect and class left that mob. He told me that a friend of his had seen Big John and described him as a shell of his former self. We spoke about him for a while, and Vinny said, I always knew he was a dog, but I can't believe they gave him a position. He was getting abused when he was around that Brooklyn crew, and he meant when Big John was an associate. Then added, do you remember the chompers he had? Again, I was hysterical laughing. Prior to getting implants, Big John had very bad teeth. Vinny also mentioned Lorenzo Menino and described him as a gem and that more guys should be like him. He then brought up the presidential election and said he was extremely pleased with the outcome. He told me, I was up watching the electoral numbers, sweating like I had 100 grand on Trump to win. When I told Vinny I don't discuss my political opinions, he said, oh, you're so full of shit. You know he's the best thing for this country. And then added, I can't vote, but if I could, I would have been at the voting booth. Vinny wanted to know what I did with my time all day. I told him for the most part, I'm sitting in front of a computer. To which he added, it beats sitting in front of Big John, no? And I didn't think of it that way, but he's 100% right. Sometimes we complain about things when it could be much worse. He admitted to listening to me while he drives and said, I put your thing on when I'm in the car. I asked him why he doesn't watch it at home, and he says it keeps him busy while driving and that he didn't want to look at my face. Overall, the time Vinny and I had together was spent mostly laughing. Of course, we spoke about things that I can't discuss. Vinny and I have a mutual respect for one another and obviously trust each other beyond words. He has an old school mentality, one where he knows who he is, but understands that the life he entered no longer really exists. Or as he put it, a bunch of stumble bumps. Without saying too much, Vinny was schooled by a few people. They're all gone now, and were all very well known. As he puts it, they plucked me out of the neighborhood and taught me lessons not taught in school. He said one of them took a pistol out one day and said to him, anyone can use this, and then tapped Vinny on his head and told him, but if you know how to use this, you'll go far in this life. Please remember to like this video if you haven't already. It helps make YouTube suggest the video. And for anyone who'd like to show their appreciation for videos like this, or help keep this podcast going, you can do so by the Super Thanks icon down below, or the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Vinny has always been what I consider a capable guy, but more importantly, he's a thinker, remembering the lesson he was taught. If ever in his company, you know he's serious, but someone who possesses a good heart. And as the saying goes, one good heart recognizes another. When we were finished eating, the waiter walked over with the check. I tried to grab it, but Vinny put his hand up and told the waiter, our uncle's got the check, he's in the bathroom. His name is Sideburns. The waiter looked confused, and then Vinny told him he was only kidding and grabbed the check. He told the waiter to keep the change, and when he walked away, he told me, poor bastard's probably only making $15 an hour. Before we parted ways, I told Vinny he needs to go to church more, and while pulling up his window, he smiled at me and said, okay, Father John,